Welcome into another week of Every Day We're Covering. Chris Parks, S.J. Munoz with you here as we have our New Year's hangover, our college football playoff semifinal hangover and recap coming up here for you. Some pretty darn good football over the weekend, S.J. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I guess bowl season was saved in some people's minds. There was a lot of fear and trepidation there heading into the New Year's Day games. Kind of seemed like everybody was ready to, phone it in and just, give up the Bulls. We can get into that later, of course. But yeah, I thought it was ended up being a pretty good weekend, and we did all right ourselves.
Yeah, we did do pretty good. We'll do the recap here of how things went here for you from the last time that we recorded and talked to you, and of course, and we'll dive into what's going on here this week. We're going to throw a couple of other games in there, picks for you as well, and probably dabble a little bit in the NFL and take a look at the FCS championship also, just to spice it up and add some more games in here for you this week. But I'm going to get right into it and have some fun. Of course, as we get rolling here, we always like to tell you what's keeping us lubricated and hydrated as we power through the weekend. I'm sure everybody had maybe a couple of beverages this past week, or at least over the weekend, maybe perhaps celebrating the New Year's holiday. And SJ, what do you got pouring over there?
Well, I'm hoping I'm not doing too much of my Collinsworth today, but the sinuses did come back with a vengeance. Having some issues there. So on that note, I got a little bit of a Grandpappy's old cough syrups. Doing a little Maker's Mark tonight. Never hurt anybody. Just maybe get that throat a little bit, feeling a little better. So I'm a hot toddy, so to speak, is what I'm sipping on tonight over here.
All right, well we're on the same wavelength a little bit here then because we're mixing it up. We're going to the hard liquor apparently this week. I've had a few of these. We kind of busted this recipe out here recently over the holidays because I saw it, and I had quite a few of these on the New Year's Eve day, and we're kind of doing the mule, but with the cranberries. So shout out to my friends at Tito's, getting a little of that in there, and then going with the ginger beer, and then throw in the cranberry juice, and it gives it a little extra nice kick. So I've been enjoying these. It's kind of feels like a holiday type drink to me. I don't know.
Yeah, not to get too deep into it, but I'm sure a lot of Tito's was consumed after that ending last night. I'm sure there's a lot of sad campers down there in Texas.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I think the weather too, of course, on my end. I mean, I'm sure you're about the same boat, hovering around freezing. So I always like a good, stiff cocktail when it's a little cold to get that antifreeze in you and get warmed up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yeah, sure. Those Longhorn Network lovers were probably drowning in that good old Tito's and Shiner and all that good stuff last night after the ending. We have some really good games, of course, on that front to talk about. But first, before we dive into that topic, one topic that we kind of wanted to touch on that you kind of alluded to here at the leadoff is, bowl season as it is turned out pretty darn good overall. I mean, I think everybody would agree that they probably sat down and enjoyed not just a couple of games, but there were quite a few that were really good contests to sit down and watch, at least entertaining. Whether or not it was the two teams that you expected to be out there on the field as far as personnel and coaches and all that stuff is concerned, maybe not, but there still turned out to be some pretty good games in those situations when we thought, a team might struggle, but they then ended up playing well. And when I understand the blowhards on the game day there on New Year's Day were kind of, having their rumblings about whether or not bowl season still matters. And I think we're both on the side of, yes, it definitely does.
Yeah, it's obviously a different landscape, but I mean, we've talked about in the past. Maybe we're not totally, on board with the opt out thing and stuff of that sort. But I mean, it is what it is at the end of the day. Like you said, there was some pretty competitive games, and especially in the games that really mattered. Those obviously went down to the wire. The funny thing and the irony of it all is, the people that were at least I caught, and I don't catch it often. I said that to you, just usually too busy, or that show's gone from a long time ago from being any type of credible information. Is more just cartoon slapstick type of deal these days. So it's not really worth the time. But I guess I was just bored that day, or nothing else was on, or I was Dick Clarked out, what have you. So I caught a few minutes of it. But yeah, just the irony of it all is just that it's you're the basically your network, who your employer, who you work for, is the reason that the situation is the way it is. So I mean, kind of take a look in the mirror there, and maybe they were talking to their employers. Maybe that was their way to get it out in the open. But I do think we saw some games. I mean, I know there was blowouts, but 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there has always been blowouts. I just kind of I find it a little bit humorous that we act like that used to be some perfect system, some end all be all what we used to have, and we're closer to that than we've ever been now. But yet we want to like wax nostalgic and act like, oh my God, there was never any discussion and there was never any disagreement. When basically newspaper writers were staying up till 2 a.m. taking pen to paper, and that's how we decide the champion. That was a better way, supposedly. That's what we're led to believe. So it's kind of amazing that we only remember the good things about it. I'll we've said it on here. I know it's not a perfect system. It can't be unless you're going to do a legitimate playoff where every team gets a spot, or you earn your spot through divisions. Similar to NFL.
Hmm.
That's the only way there is to get a perfect system. But without that, it's the best we got. I mean, I understand the issues, but maybe use your brains and come up with some bonus bonus setups for through NIL, or do what you got to do through the networks, the sponsors. There's ways to do this. You got smart people in the building. You got billion-dollar entities. Figure it out. If you don't like it, do something about it instead of just complain.
Yeah, exactly. These games, to the some of the teams that we watched, you could tell really did matter, even if they weren't, playing in the semifinals. A team like Missouri, for example, we knew they
Mhm.
were going to be fired up to play that game, and they played well, and it was a good game. I mean, it was pretty entertaining to watch. Obviously, Ohio State had their struggles for certain reasons, but those types of games are still, I think, going to be important, even when things change. I mean, and the one game that they're, I'm sure, alluding to the most that probably got everybody all up in arms and was unfortunate was the Georgia Florida State situation. But that's going to solve itself. That is getting fixed next year with the expanded playoffs. So that's not going to be a problem anymore. I mean, the only issue you're going to have is maybe that tier that's just below the playoff games. So you're going to have your 12 team playoff now. So most of those, like, if somebody deserved to really be in, we've already talked about that. That's going to happen now. But those games are maybe just a tier below that. That's where you're going to have to figure out, yeah, do I give a kid an incentive to play? Maybe work it into their NIL deals when they sign with the school in the first place, because that's what's happening now. Figure out a way to make them stay and play those games to make them more entertaining. Those are the ones that maybe will have a little bit of an issue, but you get just below that, and teams that are making them, they're still going to be happy that they're playing in the postseason. They still want that extra time to practice and get guys ready for the next season. You heard coaches talk about that for ages. What they feel is more important than the bowl game itself is that extra time together to get ready maybe for the next year. So, yeah, there's still a lot of importance to it for those teams at that lower level, and I don't think those bowl games are going to go away unless they find some kind of financial reason why they can't do it anymore. But from what we're seeing, viewership numbers were still pretty great across the board, so I don't think that that's going to be an issue, and still going to happen down the road.
Well, and that Florida State deal was also an extremely unique case, and to me, it was more about them trying to take a stand anyway, the only way they knew they could, more than a financial deal or
Yeah,
worried about playing at the NFL. Was kind of the only way they thought they could stick it to them, And honestly, I don't know if you could say it did that because it kind of just made them look bad. And
yeah.
anybody with any kind of common sense understands that has no one way or the other. It didn't matter that result of that game, whether they should be in or shouldn't be. But of course, that's the easy narrative and what goes out there real quick on online. You look at the Mountain West, the WACs, the Conference USA's, those teams they kill for that extra game, and that money is important to them. The trip, some of those players don't get to do that type of traveling throughout the year. And one idea I've heard floated about, just on sports radio, across the country is, you maybe make it more of a regional type of deal with the bowls. You no conference tie-ins. You just let maybe whatever city it may be, Dallas can pick maybe an SMU versus a North Texas.
Hmm.
Just something to that effect, just to make it a little more of a rivalry, or just teams with history, and obviously it'd be easier for the fans to travel and get there, and you'd have better, because attendance was an issue, but look across, anything in this day and age with prices, inflation type of deal. It's not easy to travel or do the extra things that we used to want to do. So that plays into, and that doesn't really get brought up. It's not all about the games. It's some people just can't afford to do it anymore, and that's just the way it is right now.
Yeah, very true. And it's, yeah, you got to make it a reason for people to really want to do it. The team I follow, for example, we talked about this when they got the matchup. It was a team that they had just played, 4 or 5 years ago in the same bowl game, the same city, and everything. So yeah, they sold like half the amount of tickets through the school because there just wasn't that same interest, and I understand that. I get it. People don't, it's tough for them to give up their hard-earned dollar unless they really think there's a great incentive reason to do so. Let's go ahead and recap here for you how we did in our bowl picks that we had when we left off with you. We left you when we were recording last time, we were in the middle of the Holiday Bowl. That's where we left you. And that was Louisville taking on USC. And apparently, the guy that was waiting behind Caleb Williams was waiting for a reason because he threw 6 touchdown passes in the game. Miller Moss, their quarterback, came in and just was lighting it up. And Louisville didn't have much of an answer in the defensive backfield. And we were wrong on that one. We both had the Cardinals there and kind of took it in the shorts on that game. But yeah, great performance by him. It's always interesting when you have a situation like that where a great player is going to be out. But boy, he was ready to take the moment and shine with it.
Well, I think that's a positive that here and there you've heard about it, but just across the board, I can think of 4 or 5 different players like that, especially at the quarterback position, where players really got a chance to show what they can do and kind of use it as that stepping stone into next year, or maybe they do move on. But either way, they get a chance to compete in a legit game and not just a practice or a scrimmage.
Very, very true. We moved on to the nightcap that night, and it was Oklahoma State getting the better of their old Big 12 foe, Texas A&M. This game was a wider margin for a while. A&M did make it within one score by the time it was all said and done, but 31-23 was the final as the Pokes get the win. That was the pick I had, and you were looking for the over in that game as well, and we just got there. It was 54 ended up being the final. We had 53 that we were looking for on our sheet, so a couple of nice wins in the nightcap there to finish off that evening there on Wednesday. So then we moved on to Thursday, the 28th, and we had the Fenway Bowl, and SMU did not look very good. 23-14, the final. Boston College took the victory. We had the Mustangs in that one, so we lost there. The Pinstripe Bowl, Rutgers a 31-24 winner over Miami, and that was a winner there for SJ. Had the Rutgers on the money line, getting a little extra coin there, and I was looking for the over in that game, and that also took care of business pretty easily. The 40.5 was the number, so we easily got to that mark. The Pop-Tarts Bowl, we were looking for NC State on the money line in that game, but Kansas State came to play. They got the early lead, and they didn't let go of it. 28-19 was the final. They played pretty well overall, I thought. Their defense really came to play, kind of kept North Carolina State in check. Their offense really struggled to find something consistently in that game. And, of course, the highlight of the night was Strawberry jumping into that toaster and getting himself eaten after the game.
Yeah, this was one of those games where, on paper, who knows what you're going to get just with the rest of them, but maybe wasn't one of those people who had circled of, I got to check this one out. But it ended up being, like we said, one of those good competitive games, and kind of there had went down to the fourth quarter at least, maybe not the last play, but there was a chance to win there late in the game. And like you said, until maybe yesterday, it was all about Pop-Tarts, man. Like, and we even, I'm there. I admit it. Like, I didn't like that time slot. We were kind of, hoping for an early morning or a late night type of deal. But they did it right. They went all in, and that's another thing that's kind of maybe we'll see more of is just the sponsors. Of course, the Mayo has kind of been that deal. The Duke's Mayo, they've been kind of going hard with that for the last couple of years. It's been a thing there. But we saw, the Scooters Coffee, Dowsing, obviously not hot coffee, but the Pop-Tarts, and then even Cheez-Its came pretty correct themselves. So that can make it fun, and whatever you got to do to make bring interest to you, even if it's just outside of the game. But that still draws eyeballs and makes it all the more interesting.
Yeah, that was just such a great marketing stunt there in that game. They did an awesome job with the mascot and the way that they did it at the end with the giant toaster, and he kind of descends down into it, and they shoot out this giant Pop-Tart that they can actually eat. It was just they did it perfectly, and I guess it just goes to show you too, those types of things, and that's why brands get involved with sporting events or events in general, because they can do something like that, be unique, And they got so much traction, of course, through social media and all the stuff that went on afterwards, just because it was a fun thing and a fun stunt. That they got more than their worth, I'm sure, of what they had to pay to be a sponsor of that game. So yeah, it kind of goes to show you how that success can work for a business as well. That was a lot of fun. I know my son got a kick out of the fact that they were kind of grabbing pieces of it and just like tossing it into the crowd to the other guys to see if they wanted to take a bite. So that was pretty cool.
5-second rule, right? It was in play. Like, yeah, don't worry if it hits the ground. Just go ahead and go at it.
Exactly. So then we finished off the night after that one with the Alamo Bowl, which is typically a pretty good matchup, and it turned out to be a pretty good game. Arizona ended up being a winner 38-24 over Oklahoma. Finished the game strong. They got another good performance out of Fafita, their quarterback. He really played well, especially down the stretch in that game. Their defense also made some really big plays late in that ball game as well. That was a nice win for Arizona. That was one of those games we talked about, a team that would probably be pretty motivated and anxious to be there. And both teams really showed up. It was a good game.
Yeah, it was kind of what I mean. Just who was able to make one more or two more plays than the other team was kind of what we thought leading up to it, and that's the way it played out. Although one point it did look like Arizona was maybe going to run away with it and kind of embarrass them a little bit, but it ended up being a nice, decent competitive game, and that's one of those just like the Holiday Bowl in the past is always seems to be some type of interest level to it, no matter what, whether it be a close game or a crazy comeback or just like a remarkable performance by a certain player. Always something kind of interesting happens from those type of games. It just seems like every year.
Yeah, we were split on that one as far as our picks go. I had Arizona laying the 2.5, and SJ was going for Oklahoma on the money line, so we split there, and I got the win there with the Wildcats. Another note on that game too that I wanted to mention. Afterwards, they interviewed one of the defensive backs there for Arizona. Montrell Irby was his name, and pretty a unique story. And I think it's the kind of stuff that you love to see in college athletics. Guys that just get a chance and then they go make something of themselves. And he had a great game. He was in on a bunch of different plays, and they talked to him because he's one of the veteran guys on the team as well. Has been around here a couple of years, but a couple of years before that, he was a guy that was living in his car, working at a local gym just to try to earn some money, and then he walked on at Arizona when the program was taken over by Jed Fish, and then tried to earn his way. He ended up earning a spot on the team, and then obviously earned his way into a major contributor on the team as well. And it's just those stories, not only I guess in sports but in life, when you see somebody that kind of bets on themselves and puts the work in and gets an opportunity. Somebody gives them that chance. And his post game interview, you haven't seen it, I recommend go watching it because he just was so emotional and humble about the situation. That's the cool stuff that you love to see during the postseason.
Well, and that's the thing too. I mean, you figure with 80 to 100 guys and on one team, there's two teams in the game. You can find maybe not to that extreme because that's a pretty crazy deal, and props to him for kind of overcoming that situation. But there's at least one legitimate, interesting story to tell at every bowl game, if not two to three. So well, why don't we? That just needs to be more of the focus, I would think, if you really care about making the Bulls a big deal again. That's the type of energy and effort that needs to be put into them. And like I said before, come with some solutions, and there's one right there because I guarantee there's going to be a lot of people either rooting for this player or following his career as he goes on and maybe to the next level or wherever he ends up. Maybe he goes to the business world, whatever he does. I guarantee a lot of people are going to remember that story.
Yeah, and it just goes to show too that it's not all about the quarterback that's getting the deal in the transfer portal. There's lots of other guys that make up these teams, and you're going to have some great stories like that, like you mentioned. So let's move on to the other games. And then after that, as we went into Friday, it was not a pleasant experience for the team that I follow. The Iowa State Cyclones in the Liberty Bowl kind of had a big letdown. The defense did not come to play, and I give Memphis credit. Their offense was really cooking pretty good, and they limited enough of what Iowa State wanted to do to get the big win there at home. 36-26 was the final. Memphis winning that game there in the Liberty, and we were looking for SJ was looking for the over there in that game, and we did get to that mark, so it ended up being 62 the number. We were looking for 57.5. I took a chance on the Clones, and that came crashing down there for me. The Gator Bowl, 22 ranked Clemson, a 38-35 winner over Kentucky. It took a touchdown with under 30 seconds left in the game for them to win it. And of course, we were a point short of what we needed because they were laying 4 in the game and they ended up winning it by 3. A game that they had led earlier, and then it went back and forth towards the end. And yeah, they come out with a victory, but old Dabo didn't do us any favors.
No, no, call me petty, but that's the type of situation when it gets to the point where I know the most they're going to get is a field goal. I start rooting against them. I mean, that's just me. I'm not going to win anyway, so I want you to lose as well. That's that was kind of where my mind was at the end of that game, and it ended up being a really crazy game. Like what, 20 some points there in like the last 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. Like they were just going back and forth. Like fans definitely got their money's worth on that one, and it ended up being a good game. Of course, not as good for us, but that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, from 7:08 on in the game, there was a field goal, rushing touchdown, passing touchdown, field goal, rushing touchdown to finish it off with the last 7 minutes of the game. Pretty crazy stuff. Then we moved on to the Sun Bowl out there in El Paso, and Notre Dame laid the hammer down on Oregon State. 40-8 was the final, and we were looking for Notre Dame there. You had Oregon State getting 6.5, but I had Notre Dame at -6.5, so we kind of split on that one. But yeah, Notre Dame really, yeah, that wasn't much of a game. They took over pretty early and really controlled it out there in the desert. And I saw an interesting note too that was the biggest bowl win that they've ever had in program history. So pretty impressive.
Yeah, the history there, but yeah, that's on the other side. That's kind of one. It's like, well, at least I know I don't need to watch this game anymore. So if I'm going to lose, let me know in the first quarter, and
Exactly.
I'll watch something else. So
Yeah.
I do appreciate them deciding that early, at least.
Yeah, especially when other games were going on at the same time. That's
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely a big bonus. Then we had the Cotton Bowl, Missouri and Ohio State. We thought this was going to be a pretty good game. I was going with Mizzou getting 3 points, and then we were looking for the over there as well. And that, of course, did not come through. It ended up being a very low-scoring game, just 17 points. Ohio State only scoring 3. I think they said that was the lowest point total that Ryan Day has ever coached for the Buckeyes. And yeah, their offense was pretty much lifeless in that game.
Yeah, that was a. I mean, it's a competitive game, but at the same time, it was a little bit of an ugly game. You gotta do what you gotta do to win. So Missouri did that, but a little bit disappointing. I know there's a couple players here and there missing, especially Harrison is a big deal. But at the same time, and of course you can't control the injury of the starting quarterback, so that wasn't something they planned on. But you would think a team that recruits to the level that Ohio State does, even their backups, could be a little bit more formidable than what they were. It was a bit of a disappointing performance, and that was the one where you could clearly see who was motivated to be there and who wasn't.
Yeah, for sure. A big win there for Missouri as far as just getting the victory. Then on Saturday, the 30th, we had the Peach Bowl, and it was Ole Miss beating Penn State, and they really ran up and down the field on them. 38-25 ended up being the final. SJ was going with Penn State laying the 4.5, and then I took the unders in that game, and of course, we both came up on the wrong side of things because, yeah, Ole Miss. That was one where I was a little bit hesitant because I had watched a couple of games where Ole Miss had put up some points, especially early in games. Maybe they kind of lost their footing later on when they played the big dogs, but they certainly were a team that could be explosive at times. And yeah, they certainly were against Penn State. That's not the typical defensive effort you'd expect from the Nittany Lions for sure.
Well, in Penn State, they're not far removed from an Iowa offense.
Yeah.
They just cannot put anything together. Here and there, they get a crazy one of their passes to the tight end was like a tip drill basically, and he catches it and goes down 60 yards, and they kind of score in unique and interesting ways, I guess is one way to put it. But they're in a tough spot there. I think Franklin's going to be on if he's not a pretty hot seat there going into next year.
Yeah, agreed. He's definitely got some work to do because he hasn't won any of those big games yet. Music City Bowl, Maryland 31-13, the winner over Auburn, and we were looking at Maryland getting points in that game, so that was no problem. They took care of business, and offense really rolled there for them. Auburn, another one of those teams that all year long has really struggled with the offense. Then, of course, the Orange Bowl. We are alluded to this a little bit already. It was a beatdown. Georgia wins at 63-3 over Florida State. We were kind of taking a flyer of the fact that maybe Florida State would be pumped up enough to keep it within the 19 that was being laid by Georgia, but that got washed away in a hurry. So no doings there for us in that one. But then the Arizona Bowl and the nightcap of Wyoming. Didn't quite get the job done here for us. They got the win, so I feel good for them to get Mr. Bull the win on the way out, but they didn't get the points that we needed because they were laying 3.5, and they got the late field goal to win it by one, 16-15 there over Toledo. But that was a pretty good game, considering the fact that, the one that they were up against, we didn't think it would give them any attention because a lot of people would watch the Georgia Florida State game, but I'm sure a lot of them turned over and tuned into it and ended up being a pretty good game.
Yeah, that commentary team was something, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, that's another story.
That was a negative, but it sounds like they may be out of the bowl game, so
Uh,
that's a good sign. Barstool kind of can't really afford the sponsorship, it sounds like, and we'll be okay with that. But ended up being a pretty good game. But that was the only one of the bad parts about it is having to listen to that haven't listened to that commentary, if you want to call it that, during the game, but we may do. They kind of need that Skycast version there, where you can just get the PA and all that. I'd prefer that if they're gonna let just some random yahoos up in the booth. I mean, I understand it's your money and that thing, but
well,
I just can't see anybody. I mean, even the ardent supporter of that outlet can't say that that's quality television.
no, no. Well, and I mean, at least try to do it the right way if you're going to do it. I mean, they were just up there yelling basically half the time, and then the sideline guy had no idea what he was talking about most of the time he was asking questions. The coach was just laughing at him there for a couple times.
What did he say at the halftime? I think, or right after he said, "Coach, you're up big." He's like, "Oh, actually, you're not up big. You're up 4 points." And the coach, they're laughing his face. And then I will say, at halftime, I didn't catch the desperate her name, but she actually did a pretty good job of like kind of mediating, and she was a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit more professional. I wish I would have. Of course, they didn't have the graphics up. Go figure, they didn't have anybody to put that up, but she actually did a good job. So I would give her credit for that. But other than that, it was pretty embarrassing. But it's about what you'd expect from who it is. So
yeah, yeah.
it's not that we were shocked. It's just it's kind of annoying when that was the only game to watch. I would have much rather had the sound from the Georgia Florida State going on, the main screen, and have that in the background. But that wasn't worth listening to either.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. They, I had turned it over. We were over visiting someone, so I had turned it over, and they were getting started, and of course, they were doing all the pregame stuff, and they get to the anthem, and it's Big Cat out there singing the national anthem. My wife turns to me and is like, "Who the hell is this guy?" I was like, "Exactly. I don't know what's going on." But
You want to talk about no shame? That's the definition right there. Takes all kinds, I guess.
yeah, no question about that. So then we moved on from there to the next big day here for us, on to the big day of them all, the Monday, January 1 games, and the Reliaquist Bowl that we talked about used to kind of be the Outback Bowl, so to speak. Was LSU getting a late score to win it, 35-31 over Wisconsin. Not what we would expect from that game at all. The points, of course, went over. We were looking for the under, and I had LSU, and they were laying 10 when the opening line came out. So did not work out for us in that game. LSU, they came back, and kind of made some good plays at the end, but it took some doing. It was only 3:08 left in the game when they got that last score to go back up, and they were struggling because they were behind a good chunk of that game, and really was surprising that the way Wisconsin came out and scored right away and early on them. Not because LSU's got some great defense. We know that they've been giving up points all year, but the fact that Wisconsin actually went out and scored. I mean, they're a team that we're kind of usually watching thinking, hey, they're going to get to 14 points, but yeah, it was a different story that day.
Yeah, as we said before the game, if they score 7 in the first quarter, I'll be sweating. And they had what, 14, I think,
Hmm.
and then 21 real quick into the second, even. So I was one of those. I couldn't believe it, but it was fun to watch. That's for sure. Like it was a great game, but it was definitely the exact opposite of what not just us, but I guarantee a lot of people kind of saw playing out in that game. But that's the good part about Bulls. I think that needs to get spotlighted again and more, is just the the unpredictability can be a bad thing, but can also be a good thing. In this case, it was good.
Yeah, we moved on to the Fiesta Bowl. A couple of games were going on at the same time. The Fiesta and the Citrus. The Fiesta Bowl, it was Oregon taking on Liberty, the good old upstart Liberty Flames. And, well, the game started like it was going to be interesting for folks because Liberty went right down the field and got an opening touchdown. They did not convert on the extra try, so they only had 6. And then it was all Ducks after that. They clamped down, and then the offense got cooking there. You kind of knew that if Bo Nix had a chance to shine in his last game, he was going to do it. And they really got on track. Got the ground game going too, and the kind of what we expected. We thought that Oregon would have no problem covering the big spread. They were laying 16.5, and yeah, they got it done.
Yeah, it's nice to see something make you feel smart. I guess for once, something plays out like it should, because that was basically how we described it heading into the game, and not much else to say about that. Oregon looked good, and Liberty was obviously overmatched, but of course you accept the challenge. Why wouldn't you play in the game? But they obviously just it wasn't an even match, that's for sure.
Yep, and then in the Citrus Bowl, that maybe kind of played out the way we expected too, but we just snuck it under the wire as far as what we were looking for points. The line was at 35.5 when we started, and points got to 35 because it was a 35-0 game. Tennessee getting the win over Iowa. And the thing that made it interesting is Tennessee wasn't letting off the gas at all at the end of that game. They were throwing and scoring anytime they had a chance, and they actually had the ball in the red zone at the end of the game and were still running plays, but Iowa stopped them, and the time ran out eventually, and we held it at 35.
Yeah, I had to change my shirt after that game. That was I was sweating like I was like Hypo has to have the overs. Like he was literally. I mean, it's one thing to they got the ball back with maybe some minutes left. It's one thing to just run it, and if they don't tackle you, obviously you're gonna score your. They've given up, but I mean they were literally like running trick plays, pass plays. Like I mean they were trying to score like, and then they had the ball like what the 4 or 5. I was like, oh crap! But then finally he downed it. I was like, oh, but they would have scored if they would have ran that play. I guarantee they would have scored and got the overs. But that was the only thing that made sense. I was like, what's the you got a 35-point lead. There's no need to, unless maybe there's some bad blood there I don't know about between the two coaches. I don't think very many people like Ferentz, so I wouldn't be surprised if something happened there that maybe I'm not aware of. But it was interesting to say the least that he was really going for the kill in a game where it's not like you're playing in a conference opponent or somebody that have a lot of history against. Maybe there's some payback in mind or revenge. It was apparent. I mean, at least to me, that wasn't the case. Maybe it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the deal was, but yeah, it was definitely making people sweat if they were having that under at the end of that game. And what a way to send Brian Ferentz out the door for Iowa. You put up a goose egg. Your starting quarterback goes 7 of 18 for 56 yards with 2 interceptions and 4 sacks. They had a grand total of 11 first downs in the game, which is doing pretty good for them, actually. And they had 173 total yards. So right on brand for the Hawkeyes offensively. And yeah, Mr. Brian Ferentz's tenure is over there at the Hawkeyes. I'm sure fans are happy about that in Iowa City.
Yeah, I think Bart Scott would call that poetic justice, right?
Exactly. So that set the stage then for the big hootenannies.
Yeah,
What's
that's the technical term. Yeah, yeah.
the whoa Nellies. We got the Rose Bowl fired up out there in Pasadena, and what a game it turned out to be. Alabama and Michigan. We were split on where we were going with our picks. SJ was going with Michigan, laying 1.5. I had Alabama on the money line, and nobody can be disappointed in what they maybe chose in that game because it was even at the end of 4 quarters. They go to overtime, and Michigan makes the plays to get it done. Alabama ends up getting stuffed on a run attempt up the middle with Jalen Milroe that ends the contest. And boy, there were a lot of tense moments. There were a lot of mistakes by both teams, but there were some big plays by both teams as well. And I think you got kind of a little bit of a taste of everything you'd want in a semifinal game in that one for sure.
Yeah, I think the mistakes kind of stood out to me. Not to say it wasn't a good game, but for the players of this level and this magnitude of a game, like I understand asking somebody to make an incredible fourth down play or maybe make a sack in a big moment. That's a tough ask, right? But
Yeah.
all we're saying is catch the punt. Don't hit somebody out of bounds. Like I mean, it's like elementary stuff that they're just. It's crazy that I mean, and that just shows you the pressure of the moment and coaching only goes so far. You get lost in everything. So opt outs or not, the best players that are playing are still making these type of decisions in the biggest games. So it's just it's part of the game. That's it just, but it is kind of it's just striking and really sticks in your mind after the game that this quality of athlete is the brain sometimes it doesn't match with the physical talents, and that's not a knock on anybody in particular. That's just the pressure of the moment.
Yeah, 27-20 the final. Michigan wins it. And yeah, two different muff punch situations in the game for Michigan. One that they lost that cost them early when they looked like they had some early momentum. It let Alabama kind of take the momentum away from them at that time because they went down and scored. And then at the end of the game, when they got the ball back with under a minute to go, almost drastically lost the game by mishandling the punt inside of the 5 yard line. And they ended up being at the one and had to get a couple yards just so they could take a knee to get it to overtime, which was a little bit tense for them.
Yeah, and even the mental side of it goes to the coaches as well, because you look at the knee that you mentioned. They call a timeout to
Yeah, what was that?
kneel it again. Like I still haven't heard anything what happened, and Harbaugh even looked confused. I'm sure he's not going to take blame for doing anything that was out of sorts. But even I mean the last play that Alabama called there in overtime, some people were saying that the quarterback had the wrong read on it. But even just calling that play, I was shocked. That was the last play they came up with. I get that maybe he didn't do the right thing, but what was working for them was kind of quick outs, maybe some across the middle, quick like short routes. I thought that was the way they were going to go. Maybe maybe a little pick action, something like that. I was really surprised the way that Michigan's D line had controlled that game, especially in big moments. That was what they decided on, and of course, there's always going to be the football guy that says, well, if they did this and the guard pulls and bro, like it's just a stupid play call. That's all it is. You can excuse it any way you want. I just don't think that was the best move, and especially it was uh, particularly surprising when it's someone like Saban.
Yeah. Well, and I don't hate the idea of giving him a chance to be able to use his legs at some point in the play, but that shouldn't be like him having to take off right away and try to run up the gut. I mean, that's odd, very odd call.
Well, and even the way he ran it, he was like like almost like
Yeah.
a submarine. Like, dude, you're about 3 yards away.
Yeah, no
Like,
chance, not
unless you're
even.
calling the tush push, you got to make a move at least. You got to do something to get upfield.
Yeah, if the two defenders would have stepped out of the way, he just would have fell flat on his face at the 3 yard line. Game over, anyways. Yeah, odd. The other two things that really stood out for me in that game that I thought were interesting to just kind of note, you don't see an Alabama team seem that mixed up and confused that often. They pointed out so many times during the game where there was a linebacker that maybe was supposed to go with somebody on and out, and they were thinking they're going to get passed off. They didn't, or they didn't catch up to it fast enough. And there's so many of those kind of like little crossing or quick motion routes that they just were not covering all game long. And you just don't expect that from an Alabama team that is going to have great linebackers that are fast. It's not that they don't have the ability to make that coverage. Their reads were just pretty awful at times. And maybe that's credit to Michigan and the way they ran them too. I don't know.
Yeah, I think some of the maybe common narratives or things that are easy to point to or just assume that that's the case. I think those are maybe dispelled a little bit in the case that Michigan seemed to be the faster team to me, at least across the board. The speed advantage wasn't there that Alabama usually has. I wouldn't necessarily say the quarterback play was an advantage either way. Both guys made a couple plays. Both guys also made some big mistakes. But even the physicality, I'd give that to Michigan as well. So those were two things that I think just in football in general, if you're the faster team and if you're the more physical team, more than likely you're probably going to win the game unless, barring some, five turnovers or just, just some, maybe a putrid offense type of thing. Other than that, you're probably going to win the game in most cases.
Yeah. Well, in the way the game started, you thought, oh my, this is over right away. When you thought that McCarthy threw that pick immediately on the first play, they luck out and get to keep the ball, and that changed a lot of things. The other thing that was pointed out, or that we all saw throughout the game, that again, maybe it's the moment, the pressure, I don't know, but how does your center at Alabama not know how to put the ball on his quarterback more than 50% of the time? I mean, some of those snaps were just horrendous, and nothing the quarterback can do about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of just going back to how we started talking about the game, the little mental errors. You're not asking them to make a 5-star play. You just do the simple thing you do every play. It
Hmm.
was It was a little surprising. Even on the last play, it was a
Yeah,
if you're gonna get one right, that's the one to get right. And it was obviously, I mean, that probably timing, is
yeah.
gonna be one thing that's pointed to on that play. I still don't think it was a good play call, but that didn't help at all.
No, certainly cost him a lot. So you were the winner there on that one, taking Michigan into the title game. And then we were shaking hands and feeling good about Washington's chances to win on the money line against Texas. And it did come to fruition, but not without a little bit of heart attack there at the end because Washington kind of got in their own way a little bit towards the end of the game and tried to be a little bit too cute. I mean, I know that's what they're good at is throwing the football, but they threw the ball 9 straight times at the end of the game when they just needed to milk some clock. Unfortunately, they have an injury to their running back that looks like it's a pretty big injury that might hurt them moving forward. And they had to call a timeout when they, of course, didn't want to. They were forced to by the rules, and that gave just enough time for Texas to get down the field. And of course, there was another big mistake, I guess, glaring issue at the end of that too. When on the punt, when the guy runs into the guy trying to catch the ball, gave him a free 15 yards to get down the field, closer. But great play by the defensive back on the very last play, textbook knockaway by the corner to save the deal and give Washington the victory. And boy, it really would have been, I think, a shame had that ball been caught and Texas wins that game because Washington controlled it throughout.
Yeah, that should have been, in my mind, at least a double digit win, maybe even more, maybe even 20-point type of win. They looked like they were about to do that in certain a couple instances, but had to settle for a field goal. And then of course you talked about the mistakes. That was a little unnerving, and this is kind of the story of the day, and maybe the story of college or football these days because you see it at all levels. Maybe it's just something we need to get adjusted to. But it was interesting to the end. I don't know if I'd both the games were competitive. I don't know if I consider them like all time greats. They were definitely interesting and a lot of intrigue. Don't want to get caught up in the moment too much because, like we said, the biggest thing that I kind of took from it was the mental errors and kind of the whatever you want to call it, just the odd odd situations and scenarios that you don't typically see. But credit to Michigan and Washington, of course, for getting it done and finding a way to win. But should be a interesting setup there. I'm a little bit of course we'll get into it later, but I'm not quite as high on Washington as maybe I was heading into this week. That game did make me a little bit nervous here.
Yeah, 37-31 was the final. Washington wins it. The one thing I will say, though, is that especially early in the game, Michael Penix was Michael Penix. The guy was on fire. He was throwing a couple of those throws, especially that touchdown pass that he had right between the two guys on just a line, a rope at the right perfect moment. The guy, when he's on, is just so much fun to watch because he's so good at throwing that deep ball.
Yeah, the accuracy is kind of crazy, and this, I mean, it's almost like a perfect placement. DB can be right there, and the receivers too. They don't drop a lot of balls.
Hmm.
I know he makes it a little bit easier on them because it's like I said, basically the only spot where he can get it to. But at the same time, they make a lot of tough plays and kind of help him out at the same time.
Yep. So that's how it all went for how the picks went during bowl season. And now we'll get to move along and talk about the games that are coming up. Of course, we'll get to that title game here in just a moment. But we wanted to touch on a couple of other things before we get there. SJ, I know you had your eye on a couple of things going on maybe in the NFL world here coming up this weekend.
Yeah, yeah, and then why don't we go ahead and give the what is it? CSBS? I don't even know which one it is.
The FCS,
FCS is
yeah.
what they're calling it. The one double A is that's what it's gonna be. That's kind of what I've always called it, and I stick with that in most cases. But I figure we give them some love and kind of see how that plays out. They got their championship 2 days before. I believe it's on Saturday.
Yeah.
Before that one. The one thing I kind of don't like. I guess it's maybe this is always the case, and I'm just not locked in as much as I should be. But their last games were about a month ago almost. That's
It's,
a hell of a break between
yeah.
especially when you got the biggest game of your. I mean, it could be a school thing, class thing, finals. I mean, I'm guessing it has something to do with that.
Hmm.
But I actually kind of think that plays into my in the pick I'm going to make. That's kind of why I'm leaning the way I'm leaning. Montana is a 13-point underdog. I understand South Dakota State's kind of run roughshod over the overall, FCS this year was like a 30 points per game, basically, is what they're averaging margin of victory. I was gonna, Montana just knocked off North Dakota State, who's basically been the kings of that level of football for how long? A decade, maybe longer. So, that makes you think, oh, Montana's hot, but Then you look back, a month before that, and of course South Dakota State beats them by 17 points. So you can't.
Mhm.
I don't know how much you lean on that. You obviously comparing, like opponents doesn't get you very far, but it's something to go off of, and so maybe Montana's not the heater I thought they were, but at the same time, getting that month off, I think is a great preparation time, and I think they'll cover that 13 points. I'm expecting South Dakota State to probably get it done, but I think they can cover that 13 and at least make it competitive. It is what Frisco, Texas, I believe.
Yep.
So outdoor facility, so could have a little bit of elements. I understand it's not going to be any type of blizzard, but cold weather usually can keep that score down, and maybe benefit Montana a little bit. The Grizzlies are used to those, well, of course South Dakota State is as well, but I think they can stay within that number. 13 points just seems a little high, especially for a national title game. I understand things are different at that level, but a month to prepare, I think you can keep it within 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, the game, and I misspoke. The game actually is on Sunday.
Okay,
It's a
so
Sunday at 1 o'clock there for that title game there in Frisco, and that's traditionally where they played it, for a long time as well. Yeah, it is awkward, and I think that's kind of the way it's always been set up. And you're right on with what you're thinking. They break for finals, they give kids a chance to be home for the holidays. I think a little bit if they want, and that's kind of been always the mindset at that level. But yeah, it stinks that you have to wait around that long before you play your title game. I mean, your mind's there for a long time. But yeah, South Dakota State, the defending national champions, so they've looked good. And like you said, Montana was kind of on a heater. They got hot here at the end of the season, and they've really played well. I'm gonna roll the same kind of logic that you're rolling with here. I think Montana's been playing well enough and beat some pretty good teams. They've won 2 overtime games to get to this spot. So that kind of gives them a little bit of boost to that team of the moment destiny kind of thing feel. So I think they keep it within the 13. I'm with you where I think maybe South Dakota State pulls it off at the end, but I think it's going to be a close game. So I'm going to go Montana getting the points there at least, but maybe South Dakota State to win it. So yeah, it should be a fun one to watch for sure at that level. That'll be a good contest. Those two teams are fun.
yeah. Speaking of Sunday, I guess I had a couple NFL to throw. Just maybe beef up our little our pick 'em list here.
Hmm.
Um, I guess, I mean, as far as I know, the Bengals, they're out, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they're
they're out
they're
now. Yep.
yeah. So for some reason the Browns are coming in as the underdog, so I'm going to take them on the money line. I don't think obviously the Bengals don't have anything to play for, and even if they did, we kind of saw what we got. There's no quarterback there. There's nothing to they can't mount any type of offense, and the Browns have had a hell of a season. So I'm gonna take that as easy money. Of course, there's a chance that the Browns rest a lot of players. I still think they can get it done though, even if they do that.
Yeah.
Also, like the Bears, they're getting 3 points at Green Bay. Basically, this is kind of just a chance to stick it to them, especially with that rivalry and those teams don't. There's no love lost there. Keep them out of the playoffs. That's kind of why I'm. And the Bears have been playing really well lately. You would have never thought a month and a half ago that they would they get to 7 wins, I believe, 6 or 7, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 5. I don't know. Either way, 3 or 4 wins would have been unheard of for them
Hmm.
a couple months ago. So whatever they've gotten, they've definitely overachieved. And then lastly, that Sunday night, the finale of the week. I think that's going to be a shootout. I'm not going to call it either way, but I think they'll easily hit the over 50 Miami and Buffalo. I think it's going to be a down to the wire type game, a 31-30 type deal.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun game. A lot on the line there as we kind of were hoping maybe that matchup would turn into, and that's what it did. So, yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, Bears were 7-9, so they got a chance to actually even up their record with the Packers this year if they were to get the win. So it'd be pretty cool for them. Two games that I saw that I was kind of, immediately would be on. Two teams that are still kind of playing to make sure they're in that playoff picture, and I just think the motivation is going to be there. Jacksonville is laying 5.5 against Tennessee. I think Jacksonville gets that done. They've been a team that's played well enough throughout this season. I know they've dealt with some injuries and things here at the end, but I think they still they push that. And then after laying an absolute turd last week for some reason, I think Tampa Bay bounces back. They want to go into the playoffs and go in strong. They're playing Carolina, who's obviously struggled, and they're just laying 5. So I think the Buccos bounce back and get that one there too. So those are the couple that I kind of had peeked at there on the NFL side. So that sets up then, of course, the last one of the college football season, and down in Houston, Texas, at NRG Stadium, and it'll be Washington and Michigan battling it out for the title. Of course, we talked about both teams and their games and the way that they played coming into this one. SJ, I think you were kind of alluding to earlier there that does give you a little bit more trepidation with the way that game went against Texas. But I guess how are you feeling about how the game's going to end and how it's looking compared to that line?
Well, the things that kind of outside of the mistakes we talked about earlier, what kind of stood out to me as far as the game, how the game played out itself was the Washington's run defense, or maybe lack thereof, is in my mind. I know Texas didn't really pound the ball at him, but at the same time, you had what Baxter was 7.1 yards a carry, and Blues back up 6.6 yards a carry. That's a little bit high per carry in my mind, especially when you have the likes of Blake Corum, a 1,100-yard rusher with 25 touchdowns on the season coming at you. That's a little bit unnerving. So that's something that kind of gave me a little bit of pause. I understand that the style of play is different. It's not exactly Pac-12 is not a run based. Obviously, I know they're switching conferences, but still a Pac-12 team is for all intents and purposes. But um, just giving up that type of yardage is not something that's going to say, oh, could be a blowout or an easy win. At the same time, I'm not the passing attack that we spoke of with Penix and his receivers. That's no easy. That's something that you're not going to see, and I there's no way Michigan's seen anything like that this season. Nobody has. Even Oregon saw it and they still couldn't stop it the second time.
Yeah.
So that kind of just shows you how potent that attack is. At the same time, though, uh, Michigan is only allowing 150 yards passing per game. Of course, that's in the Big Ten, so take that for what you will. But they've put up those numbers, and they're also second in the nation in turnover margin. That Michigan is. That is 9 fumble recoveries, 16 interceptions on the season. So obviously, any game, of course, that's the case. But with a game of this magnitude, the turnover battle is going to be big, and I also think third down is something to watch. That's kind of maybe there's a lot more, of course, nuances. But as far as just like the bullet points, I guess to say that's kind of what I'm looking at so far. It's kind of what's sticking out to me as far as the bullet points between these two teams.
Yeah, it definitely that the style contrast is going to be really really fun to watch. I mean, you're getting two very very different teams. Obviously, Washington, who's just so good at throwing the ball downfield, Michigan, who rarely will ever throw it down the field in that kind of capacity. They're not just going to heave them up and try to win deep balls. That's not what they do. The ground game is very potent. I was impressed with the way that they conducted themselves throughout that game against Alabama. Like I said, did a great job of keeping Bama confused. It was a well called game. They found a lot of seams and openings, especially on some of those kind of guys out of the backfield type routes and those kinds of things. They did really well with that. So that was surprising. Obviously, I feel a little bit bad that I've doubted them so much all the way throughout the season. They got it done against Ohio State. They get it done against Alabama. That's a huge win, kind of getting over the hump for them. That can go one of two ways, though, too, I think. Obviously, they're going to have a lot of confidence coming into this game, and you should. But do you have a little bit of that kind of already relief in your mind? Like, we beat Alabama, we kept the SEC down. Is was that kind of enough for them? Do they want to go out here and put their best foot forward against Washington to win it? Washington, on the other hand, I think probably has a little bit more of that what do we have to lose mindset. I mean, I don't think anybody, start of the season would have said for sure that they think they're a team that's going to win it all. Probably would have said they're a team that's in the top 10, but a chance to win a title, I don't know. And the way that Penix has risen to the occasion and played so well in some of these big games, that's what is really going to be interesting to watch here. Can Michigan's defense tamper him down? Because they're just going to have to limit him a little bit. You're obviously not going to keep him to nothing. But if you can limit him a little bit, then Michigan's got a pretty good chance to win this game. They're 4.5-point favorites. The number right now is at 55.5 is what I'm seeing here on the map I'm looking at. It's a 6:30 game on Monday. I'm not gonna change my mind though. I think Washington wins this game. I would love them obviously getting the points, but I would, in these types of situations, I'm just going to kind of go who's going to win it or not. I'd probably play the money line because I like the way Washington's playing. that downfield passing game, I think it's just going to rise to the occasion. Those receivers, it just takes one or two big plays like that to maybe flip things, and they're so good at it that I think that's what changes it in this one. And I'm going to go. I'm going to stick with Washington.
One more thing of note, I suppose, is the injury to Washington running back is something to keep an eye on as well. I mean, as far I would assume I don't know if he. I guess I don't. I
Yeah,
shouldn't
it
assume
looks
this,
like
but I
he's
don't think
out.
he's
Yeah,
playing. I don't think so. We can rule that out at least in our minds. I
that's
don't think
true.
he's
That
going to
is a
be out.
big hurt.
And then when we talked about quarterback play earlier, especially in the Michigan Alabama game in particular, it wasn't. I wasn't going to give it an advantage one way or the other because I didn't believe that either one quote unquote outplayed the other guy. In this case, I don't think there's going to be any question who the better quarterback is on the field. That's kind of the straw that stirs the drink, as they say. I'm with you. I am going to take the points though, but I'm going to do a same game parlay. I'm going to do the points and the overs. I think it's going to be a big, and it might even be I could see Washington, pulling away for maybe a 10 to 12 point win. But I also could see, just a last minute touchdown, something like that. So I'm not confident enough, obviously, to take them straight up. But I think they'll at the least cover that spread. But I do still think they're going to win. But give me a little bit better odds. I'm going to play the overs as well because I think it's and if it gets up there, it could be a good night for those fans from Seattle. If it gets up to the 60s, I don't think Michigan can keep pace with that. Not the way
Yeah.
they play.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I guess, kind of the thing. You expect Washington to put up some points no matter how good Michigan's defense is, just because the way that they're playing, you're going to miss on a couple plays. You're going to have a couple breakdowns in coverage once in a while. A guy falls down, whatever it may be. Yeah. So that's probably a good idea to go looking at that over the total type of number in this game. But Michigan's proven that they can make plays when they need to, and give McCarthy credit. Even though he's not been the flashiest guy out there, he's gotten it done and found a way to help his team win. Whereas in the last couple of seasons, it's maybe been on his back a little bit that they didn't. That game last year, he had two big interceptions that cost him in that game against TCU. So he has definitely improved. So
Well, I think it's safe to say too there won't be a surprise if either team wins in this case. At least in my mind,
yeah,
I would have been surprised had Michigan or Washington lost yesterday. Going into it, of course, the way it played out, that wouldn't have been the case. Halfway through, but going into it, I thought both teams would come in with a rather easy victory, and that wasn't the case. But with this final matchup, it's about as coin flip as you get heading into it, at least on paper. Of course, a lot of times they don't play out like that once you get on the field.
yeah, should be a lot of fun to watch. We'll love every minute of it. That's for sure. We love the sport of college football, and the end of the season has turned out to be some good appointment television, and we'll hope that that's the case again in that national title game. Of course, we'll be back after that to recap it for you, kind of put a nice little bow on the college football season, and then start diving into some other topics that we'll get to through on this program and throughout the other seasons. But it's been a good run here this bowl season, that's for sure. We hope you have enjoyed listening along with us and watching with us and making those plays, and hopefully you've had some success. You can follow us on our socials, Twitter at SJMBets, at Cherokee CP. You can also, of course, listen to the program in a number of different platforms if you'd like to share them. Spotify, Amazon, and then also on Google Podcast. Just share it around. We'd appreciate that. Give us some reviews, react to the polls, all that good stuff, and we'll be having some fun with you along throughout. So I hope you enjoy the championship, and we hope you enjoy making some plays as well. So that's SJ Munoz. I'm Chris Parks. Thanks for joining us for another week of Every Day We're Covering. We'll see you next week for some more covers.